Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Unified. I'm Paul Lukas of UniWatch, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chris Creamer of SportsLogos.Net. This week on Unified, we talk about the latest uniform news from Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA. We have our question of the week submitted by one of you, our listeners, and we have our main topic, how to fix the NBA uniform mess. Can it be fixed? Is it in fact fixable? Does it in fact need to be fixed? I think it does, but Chris thinks it does, but we'll see. But before we get to all of that, Chris, how are you? How's your week been?
Pretty good. I had a bit of a exciting moment last week as a new author. And for those who don't know, The Fabric of the Game, my first book that I've ever written. I co-wrote it with Todd Radom, designer, about the stories behind the NHL's names, logos, and uniforms. I got a hot tip that the book was on a bookshelf at a nearby store. So I gathered my wife into the car. We said, pandemic be damned, we're going. And we drove the half hour down to Oshawa, went into the big box store and saw my book on the shelf for the first time, which was...
No, wait, I don't mean to interrupt, but the book was published like last fall. What took
in
them so
November,
long? What
election day, actually. Biggest news of the day. I don't know. I think they just sold out before they had a chance to put it in stores. And that's the story I'm going with, because that sounds really cool. But I do know there were some supply issues, and they did sell more than they expected to. But, there was 2 on the shelf. By the time I got there was 1 left. And it was an interesting feeling. It was I felt proud of myself. It made it feel real, right? That this was an actual real book, and there it is. And I'd brought a Sharpie with me because I just wanted to do this. Took the book off the shelf, made sure no one was looking, and signed my name on the inside there. And the next morning, I was feeling a little guilty about it. So I actually called the store and said, heads up, I don't know if this is cool or not, but I signed my name in this book. And fortunately, they were happy with it. They put a little signed copy sticker on the front, and it sold, a couple hours later.
So you're a local author. They should be thrilled. Like they should get more copies in and have you down to do a signing and the whole bit.
Sure. And I called the local bookstore, the one actually in town, from the town I live in, and they first they said they were quite upset with me because there was no copies available, and they kept getting phone calls about it. I said, I have nothing to do with that. But I hooked them up with the distributor, and hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll be able to buy this book in stores soon. A victim of my own success.
That's really excellent.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. What about you?
I had a good week because, as I mentioned last week, I had gotten a vaccination appointment, a coronavirus vaccination appointment for mid-April, but was hoping to move it up. And I have, in fact, moved it up to this coming Friday.
Nice.
So this Friday, March 5th, I'll get my the first injection, and then 3 weeks later, I'll get the second one. So I'm very happy about that.
Awesome.
And also, I bought myself a new toy. I bought a new computer for the first time in quite a while, because especially with this podcasting, I was starting to feel like, if this one computer I have, I didn't have a backup. And I thought, if this one goes on the blink or the fritz or whatever, I'm really screwed. Yeah. So I thought I better get, a nice shiny new computer. And so I bought a new laptop. And I hoped to be using it for this very episode, but we had a little Zoom problem with it getting set up. So hopefully by next week, I'll have kinks worked out, and maybe I'll look even better on video or sound even better on audio because of the fancy new processors and all of that. Right. But it is nice to have a new machine instead of an old rickety machine.
Now, is that irony that you bought the new computer to help with the podcast and then it just didn't work?
That might be arguably ironic.
We'll ask Alanis Morissette, though. Her definition is a little shaky. So
I was hoping to surprise you to say, like, Chris, I got this new machine and I'm using it right now. Don't I look crystal clear? But unfortunately, that didn't work out.
Yeah,
but
instead you surprised me with this darn thing ain't working. By the way, I got a new computer.
Yeah, well, it was working fine for me. I just couldn't hear you.
Right.
So there's been news, aside from our personal news, there's been some interesting news in the uniform world since our last episode. And one thing that's really interesting me is some news that hasn't happened yet, and that is coming up this Sunday is the NBA All-Star Game. And so that's on March 7th. And as of now, we still have not seen the uniforms. That obviously this year's All-Star Game, this season's All-Star Game, is different than the ones from past seasons because they originally weren't even going to have it. They had scrapped it because of the pandemic. And then Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, sort of decided, yeah, maybe we can sort of throw something together. And it's not in the original location that they had planned, which was Indianapolis, and instead it's going to be in Atlanta. Now, I don't know if you've heard anything through the grapevine, because usually the NBA All-Star uniforms are themed to the host city or the host team. And clearly they haven't had enough time to do anything for Atlanta because that wasn't the originally planned city. What we have seen is like t-shirts and not actual uniforms, but just sort of promotional gear in Indiana Pacers colors. So that's clearly what was originally planned, was that they were going to have these Pacers themed all-star uniforms. And it's interesting to me that they haven't actually said yet. As we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, now this could have changed by the time people hear this, because this episode will go live on Thursday. But as of now, Tuesday afternoon, we don't know what the All-Star uniforms are going to look like. And I've sort of been waiting for them to say something. Have you heard anything?
Nothing at all. And usually the uniforms have leaked months ago.
Right.
Being released. I don't know what they're going to do, right? It's like you say, this all came together at the last minute, and I doubt they're going to wear the Indiana Pacer themed uniforms. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? They got a whole new
logo. To do that in Atlanta.
You're right. Well, the fact that they made a whole new logo for the game in a completely different color scheme, what's the point? They're probably going to recycle the Indianapolis uniforms in 2 years, 3 years, whenever they're getting it again anyway.
Oh, right, because they as a sort of consolation prize, they're getting the game for a few years down the road.
23, I think, or 24, I can't remember.
Right.
So they're going to want to use those uniforms, I'm sure. But what they could do, which is what they used to do for a very, very fantastic 6-year span, I guess, 5 seasons. One of those years was canceled by the lockout. Each player wearing their individual team uniforms. What do you think about that?
That's what I'm hoping for personally, because I loved that span as well. It was from 1997 to 2002, and it was like Major League Baseball does the All-Star team, the All-Star game rather, where there weren't special uniforms. You just wore your regular team uniforms, and the one conference wore white and the other conference wore color, and I love that. I love the sort of crazy quilt of different colors on the court. And it does seem like the perfect solution for this situation. And I believe the players wear their usual team uniforms for things like the slam dunk contest and the 3-point contest and all of that, which I believe they're going to do some of during halftime.
Is that the plan?
Of this? Yeah, because they can't stretch it out over multiple days because of the whole pandemic situation. And so they're compressing it into one day. And so if the players would be wearing their regular team uniforms for those events anyway, those skills events, why not just do it for the game? I think it would be great. And it would be different in a way that acknowledges, like visually, when people look at photos and like, oh, wow, like they did it differently that year. Yeah, because a lot of things are different this year, right? It would be a way to sort of signal that things are a little different this year.
Yeah, and I love the idea. And I think that is the most practical solution to such a hastily planned event, right? Like you have the uniforms here, put them all in their city jersey uniforms or whatever, dumb thing you want to do. It's an excuse to promote those jerseys,
Well, you can't do that because you don't have enough white ones.
Right. You're right.
There aren't enough that are white.
So maybe you're right. Okay, so it might have to be either the association or the icon jersey or the statement jersey or whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to have half the players wearing white. And what I love about that is just how colorful the game looks. And especially back in like 97, 02, as a fan of a team that wasn't getting a lot of US television exposure at the time, seeing like Vince Carter out there on the court wearing a Toronto Raptors uniform on such a huge audience, that was a lot of pride I had as a young Raptors fan at the time, seeing my team's uniform out there in front of everybody.
That's exactly how I felt as a kid growing up as a Mets fan, because baseball, again, being the one sport that has always handled its all-star game with the players wearing their usual uniforms. I was always proud because the Mets were so awful, especially when I was a kid, to see, John Stearns or Joel Youngblood or whoever it was in a Mets uniform on national TV. And yeah, I always got a kick out of that. And so, and they don't have time. I mean, I understand why the other leagues have gone to all-star uniforms. We all know it's about merchandising and it's another product you can sell. They don't have enough time to put together merchandise to sell for, even if they came up with a new Atlanta themed uniform, they couldn't get them produced in time to sell them.
That's right.
Which is why we're not seeing them for sale yet. And so, yeah, I say go with the regular team uniforms. I think that would be great.
I guess the only issue I could see from the NBA's point of view is with the sponsorships on the jerseys or the advertisements on the jerseys. Because the All-Star game is always Kia.
Kia, right. That's an interesting point. Well, but there wasn't even going to be an All-Star game. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think they could work around that somehow.
They're holding the All-Star game because of the sponsorship money, I'm sure. Not just through jerseys, but through television and commercials and all that.
Right.
Yeah, if they have to strip off the various like GE patches and whatever from the team's uniforms, they can make it happen.
So we'll see. Again, that situation may have been resolved or announced by the time this episode goes live. We'll see. But as of now, as of Tuesday afternoon, we don't know. And can you think of another event, like a big sports event, if you can call the NBA All-Star Game in a pandemic year a big event, where something like this hasn't yet been announced? It's in a way, it's almost refreshing that there hasn't been like all the hype and whatnot about the uniforms.
It's like going back to the old times, right? When you didn't quite know what players were going to wear until you actually saw them take the court. Like
or in the newspaper the day before or something like that.
Right. So, hey, I welcome this. And you know what? I hope we don't know until Sunday night.
That would be fun.
That would be fun. Yeah. So we turn on the game. We have no idea what they're going to wear. But I did want to ask you this, and I know we're sort of stretching our introducing topics too long, but this is an NBA episode, so whatever. If the NBA had to stick with a special All-Star game uniform, right? Like, okay, we're not wearing the players' teams, and forget about this year, think future. What would you like to see them do?
You mean what format? Like, should it be based on the home team or just like I've always thought like having it based somehow on the host city or the host team is a good way to go. I like that.
I used to love that idea until I tried to think of the league is trying to think of what's the best way to sell these. And I thought, well, with the uniforms they've gone to in the last couple of years, where they put the team's logo, big giant team logo on the chest, rather than say a conference name, or because they're playing for players now instead of conferences, it doesn't say Team LeBron across the chest or whatever.
Right.
They're marketing to the local markets teams. So I had a bit of an idea, and it'd probably be impossible for them to actually pull off, but if they actually took each individual team's, say, color scheme or general uniform appearance, and maybe replace the team script across the chest with All-Star or whatever. So, I'm buying a Raptors jersey. I want the Kyle Lowry All-Star game jersey, and it's going to be red because the Raptors wear red. It says All-Star across the front in the Raptors font. And as a Raptors fan, maybe I want to buy that.
So it would say All-Star like in the chevron pattern.
Yeah, I forgot that they wore the chevron for a second.
I'm glad one of us remembers the Toronto basketball team's uniform.
Shows how much I'm watching the Raptors this year.
That's an interesting idea. I personally, and this is such a classic example of the different ways you and I think about some of these things. I couldn't care less about whether they sell. I just care about how it looks on the court. It doesn't really interest me about whether it's going to.
100%. I'm with you like that, but I was trying to think of a more realistic. They want to be able to sell it, so let me think of something that they could actually make money off of.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they have another year to think about it to get ready for the next All-Star game. Another bit of uniform news this week, or potential uniform news. J.J. Watt signed with the Arizona Cardinals. J.J. Watt, the NFL defensive lineman who requested and received his release from the Houston Texans. And the ink was barely dry on the contract, as they say, when a reader pointed out to me, a UniWatch reader, said that J.J. Watt, of course, wears the Walter Payton Man of the Year patch as a past winner of that award. And he's going to Arizona, where Larry Fitzgerald also is a past winner of the Walter Payton Man of the Year. And Fitzgerald hasn't actually said whether he's going to play again next year. He's like 37 years old, I think, 37 or 38, and his future is undetermined. But if he does come back for another year, the Cardinals would be the first team ever to have two players on the roster simultaneously, both wearing the Payton patch, which is a little distinction. And I have to say, I thought of this as such a little niche factoid. I wasn't even going to mention it here on the podcast. And then I tweeted that yesterday after this reader emailed me about it. And so I found a photo of Fitzgerald and a photo of Watt. And I said, if Larry Fitzgerald comes back, you'll have the two guys. And, I'm sure that you have a sense when you tweet something, what sort of response it's going to get. What it has the potential to be, like, to generate a high number of likes versus niche content that a dozen people are going to like. And I was fairly certain this was in the latter category. And it got over 700 likes, which wow. I would not have guessed that many people cared about the Arizona Cardinals or any other team becoming the first NFL team to have two Walter Payton Man of the Year patch wearers on the roster simultaneously. But people surprise you sometimes. So that's the kind of detail that I thought was sort of like a deep cut, and instead I wouldn't say it went viral exactly, but it did generate a lot more response than I expected. And so that's why I'm mentioning it here.
I never would have guessed that. That's to be honest, if I saw you tweet that, I'd be like, Paul's got it. I don't need to cover that because it's so minor in my opinion. But hey, there you go. Just
like I said, it caught me by surprise as well. Yeah. It does sort of bring up that patch is such a weird patch because everyone thinks it looks like Darth Vader.
That's what I thought.
It's the kind of it's an award you get for being unselfish. And being like a good, giving, generous spirited person. And instead you're wearing this patch that says, hey, look at me. Like, wouldn't it be better to just have like a little helmet decal or something like that? It seems to be sort of counterintuitive that you would trumpet the fact that you're a humble, generous person.
And I love when you and I sort of agree without talking beforehand, because here's the notes I wrote for this part of it. I said, looks like Darth Vader. Maybe it should be a helmet decal. So 2 for 2.
That's amazing. Folks, we did not rehearse this or confer beforehand.
I wonder if the NFL mandates that the player must wear it.
Probably. Well, that was just the protocol. It's only a few years. And when we say the Cardinals are going to be the first team to do this, it's only been since 2017 that past winners of the award wear the patch for the rest of their career.
They want to entice players to strive for the award. They see it as a badge of honor. Maybe
I think they want to promote the award. I think they want to. I think it's sort of. I hate the term virtue signaling, but I think in this case they are literally signaling that they reward virtue. That they have this award for being a good person, not just for piling up statistics or whatever. And by having the players wear it, it's a way for fans to be aware that they have this program. Although the way it turns out is that fans are mistakenly aware that players like Darth Vader.
Okay. It's great that you're celebrating good people, but as a fan of simple, clean uniforms, I don't like it there. It's just so big. And, you have the captain's patch on some players too. It's too much already.
And I mean, Larry Fitzgerald is a great example of this. He has the captain's patch. Last year, the Cardinals had a memorial patch. It was a big 8. It looked like an 8 ball, and I'm blanking on the name of the player it was for. But imagine if the Cardinals had gotten into the Super Bowl. Don't laugh.
Happened once.
But where were they going to put his Super Bowl patch? And so you have an increasing number of teams now that have a chest patch, like the Chiefs and the Steelers and Jaguars. And so I don't feel like the players need another jersey patch. I think the Payton Award would be better off being a helmet decal.
Put it on the helmet next to that "I'm wearing a headset" sticker, if that's still there.
That is still there, the little green.
Why not? They don't have a big patch on their jersey saying "I'm wearing a headset." Well, they could.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's coming. Sponsored by.
And then one other little tidbit I wanted to mention before we get to our main topic is the New York Yankees, the famously hidebound, staid New York Yankees who never do anything different and who don't put names on the jerseys or anything like that. are doing something they've never done before. And that is, as we discussed a few weeks ago when we talked about memorial patches, we said that they would probably be bringing their Whitey Ford memorial from last season, which they wore for only one day because Whitey Ford died the day before the Yankees were eliminated from the postseason. And so they wore a 16 on their sleeve for him. That was his uniform number. And we said they would probably bring it over to this season. And they have, but they've changed the design of the memorial. And what's interesting here is that the Yankees historically have typically used two formats for memorials, for sleeve memorials. Players who've had their numbers retired get black numerals on their sleeve, like they did for Whitey Ford last October for that one game, just the number 16. And then mere mortals get a black armband. But what they've done now for this year's version of the Whitey Ford patch, it's a black circle with white numerals that say 16, which is basically what every other team does for most of their memorial patches. But incredibly, and I couldn't believe this when I looked it up myself, the Yankees have never done that. It's a format that they've never used. And it's sort of like the simplest, in a way, the most Yankee-like gesture, because it's so basic, you know, a black circle with white numbers. But they've never done that before. And so here's a really simple thing that the Yankees, they're like busting loose, getting wild and crazy.
Letting their hair down.
Yeah, and doing something that they've never done before that doesn't fit with their usual protocol. And so I sort of got a chuckle out of that.
Is this the first retired number player for the Yankees to die since Steinbrenner?
For a player, for George Steinbrenner, I mean, Hank Steinbrenner died last year,
right? But I'm wondering, is this a George Steinbrenner thing to wear just the number on the side, or like? So I'm trying to figure out why they would have made the change this year. Out of
That's a good question, and of course they have carried over once before when Yogi Berra died in 2015.
Oh, so that was after Steinbrenner.
Yeah, that was after Steinbrenner. So they, in that case, and they had the number on the sleeve, and that carried over to 2016 again with the number on the sleeve. So I don't know why they changed it, but it is sort of funny to see the Yankees doing something that every other team has done, but it's not a crazy thing. It's a really simple, basic thing.
I kind of liked the fact that they were doing something different from everyone else, that there was this tradition, that there seemed to be a protocol that you mentioned earlier. Retired number gets the number. No, everybody else gets a band. But I gotta say, it does look better inside a circle. It's a lot easier to see, especially off the pinstripes.
Yeah, when you have those numerals just against the pinstripe background, it sort of blurs in a little bit, or it doesn't stand out as much.
Well, because they don't have like a white border or anything on it. It's just the numbers they wear on their back, but mini-me sized.
So those are our sort of minor uniform headlines for the week. Before we transition to our main topic, I want to say here that Unified is proud to be supported by StreakerSports.com. If you're looking for really unique sports apparel, Streaker Sports has dug deep into the archives and brought back some incredible defunct team logos. And they've even created entire collections, apparel collections, based around defunct leagues like the ABA, the WHA, and the WFL. Every couple of weeks, they release more teams and leagues. So if you're a fan of sports history, they're a fun brand to follow. They also have collections celebrating sports culture, including a licensed Miracle on Ice collection, and apparel from movies like Slapshot and Caddyshack. And they even have, and I really appreciate this one myself, they even have the only officially licensed wiffle ball apparel.
Hey.
On a personal note, I know the guys at Streaker Sports. They've advertised on UniWatch and have even asked my advice about how to handle problematic older logos that don't fit with today's cultural sensibilities. So I can personally vouch for them as great people with great products. Check them out at StreakerSports.com. And for a limited time, only for Unified podcast listeners, use the checkout code UNIFIED to get 20% off of your order. Again, go to StreakerSports.com and use the checkout code UNIFIED for 20% off.
By the way, first advertiser ever.
Yeah, our first real advertiser, but the first of many, we hope. Well, not too many, not because we don't want to be too ad heavy.
Are we the big leagues now?
We're happy to work with companies who we have a relationship and who we feel good about and who feel good about partnering with us. So, as I said, I really do know the guys at Streaker Sports, and they're good people, and I'm proud to have them supporting the show.
And I checked out their site the other day, and it looks like a lot of stuff that I'd love to own. That's for sure. So, I mean,
well, you may get your chance. So let's talk about our main topic: how to fix the NBA's uniform mess. And some quick background on this. I hear from people all the time who say, like either from email or on Twitter, I turn on the TV to watch an NBA game and I have no idea who's playing. On top of that, on Friday, and I was already planning to talk about this topic this week, but then on Friday night, the Hawks and Thunder played that absurd red versus orange game, which was so bad that the Thunder actually had to change to white uniforms at halftime, an NBA first, and let's hope last. And all this is because a lot of changes came into the NBA uniform program in the fall of 2017 when Nike took over the league's uniform contract. Let's go over those changes and assess which ones have worked, which ones haven't, which ones can be reformed, which ones should be scrapped altogether, and is it possible to get people back to where they can turn on the TV and actually know who's playing? So the first thing that the NBA and Nike did with the start of the 2017-18 season was they eliminated home and road designations. And up to that season, of course, the home team in an NBA game wore white, unless it was the Lakers, not on a Sunday because they wore yellow, and a few other exceptions over the years. But generally speaking, the home team wore white and the road team wore color. But in 2017, they eliminated that protocol and said that now the home team can wear any uniform it chooses, with the road team required to wear something of sufficient contrast. Now, we should note this isn't such a revolutionary idea. That's exactly how the NFL works. In the NFL, the home team is allowed to wear whatever it wants, and football fans generally seem okay with that. But the NBA also, they basically went a step further. They also stopped mandating that one team should wear white. And that allowed a lot of color versus color games. And that takes a step further than the NFL, because in the NFL, the home team can wear either white or color, and the road team has to wear the opposite, unless it's a color rush game, or there's a few exceptions again. But generally, that's the rule. And so what do we think of the elimination of those rules, the elimination of home and road uniforms, and the elimination of the requirement that one team wear white? Because I feel like that's a big part of the confusion that fans have. They turn on the TV and they don't they don't know who's playing or where the game is being held.
Well, it's very easy to figure out where the game's being held if you just look at the court.
You'd think, but or look at the second team in the scorebug, right? That's always the home team. But that I hear this all the time from people who say like, where they're playing, because sometimes the court is featuring an alternate logo, which we'll get to, based on the city or statement uniform, and we'll get to that in a minute.
I don't miss the home and road designations as much as I thought I would. I do like the idea that the home team gets to wear whatever they want. They're the home team. They should, right? If they want to match the fans, really, it's you're wearing a certain color for your home fans, and the road team's just there, right? They're just second banana. What I don't like is, you have some teams have 5 uniforms, some teams have 6 uniforms, and half of them aren't even in the color scheme that the team actually wears. Or like the Chicago Bulls, I find is a good example with their current City Edition uniform. There's no indication that this is the Bulls whatsoever, right? It's a black and gold uniform with Chicago across the front in a font that has nothing to do with the Bulls. I get that it's a city jersey, it's supposed to celebrate your city, but this to me is a good example of I don't know who's playing when I turn the game on. And when the Bulls are wearing their city jerseys that are black and gold, and if they're playing the Milwaukee Bucks wearing their bright blue and whatever City Edition uniforms, you have no idea who's playing, right? It could just as easily be 2 generic teams from a movie that doesn't have the licensing rights.
Does that matter? Like, does that matter? Like, especially in an era where so many fans tend to fixate more on the individual, like the player, rather than the team, and there's a lot of player movement, and a lot of fans are fans of specific players, especially in the NBA, which has really kind of pushed the notion of player identity. Does it matter so much, what the uniform is, or does it matter more who's wearing it?
I think a uniform matters in that you want to create a consistent brand across your entire identity, right? You want to be able to tie everything together, build a theme around it. And yeah, you're right. The NBA is very much a player-focused league. There's a lot of fans who will change who their favorite team is just simply because a player switch teams, and you don't see that really in any other sport.
Right.
But the team uniform's still the team uniform. When LeBron James switches to a new team every 3 years and takes them to a championship, he's still wearing that team's uniform, right? He's not wearing a jersey that says LeBron across the front. It's
Not yet.
although he probably could, if anything.
What about color versus color? Are you okay with that, or do you think one team should have to wear white?
Color versus color is fine as long as the colors are easy enough to tell apart, right? Like
Yeah,
red
not
versus
like
orange.
that Hawks Thunder game, which was
Yeah.
red versus orange.
I guess you do have to take some considerations for people with certain types of color blindness. I'm not an expert in that. I think what red green is a
Red versus green matchup, apparently, as the Jets and Bills learned in
right.
the very first NFL Color Rush
That's
game.
right.
Yeah, that's not good.
So take some consideration for that. The fact that every team, like I said, has between 4 to 6 uniforms now, you should be able to find one combination that, matches up well. Right.
I have to say, for years, I was in favor of color versus color. The whole idea of one team having to wear white was rooted in the days of black and white television, when you needed enough contrast for people watching on black and white TV. And obviously, those days are long gone. And I love it in college football when UCLA and USC play color versus color every year. It's like a one college football game where that's routinely allowed. And I had been pushing, really, or advocating for the NBA and also the NHL, and why not the NFL, to have more color on color, just because I thought it would look neat, or it would just be literally more colorful. And I have to say, it has not worked out as well as I thought it would. I think it sometimes looks chaotic. I think personally, I find I miss seeing white, because I think, especially because more so in the NHL, but a lot of times I think the white uniform is the team's best uniform. And so I kind of miss that. And I know white jerseys don't sell as well, or that's my understanding. And so that may be driving some of the teams choosing not to wear white as often, but I do kind of miss it. And I always loved the old Tex Schramm idea, when he was the president of the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason the Cowboys wear white at home, he wanted his fans, his home fans, to not always see the Cowboys wearing blue and the road team wearing white every single week. Every week would be blue versus white, blue versus white. And by having the home team wear white, he thought, oh, our fans will see, white versus blue this week, and white versus burgundy next week, and white versus green when the Packers come in, and whatever. And so it provided more variety for the home fans. And just I'm okay with the eliminating the home and road designations, but I sort of have to say I was wrong, at least in the way it's played out for me. I don't think color versus color works as well as I thought it would. And I would like to go back to seeing at least one team wear white.
Every single game, one team wears white?
Yeah, I think I would prefer that.
What about like a shade of gray? I don't mean like a team wearing a shade of gray. I mean like color versus color didn't work out as well as you hoped, but is it perhaps still better than color versus white, despite not being as amazing as you hoped it would be?
I don't know. I find I miss the white. That's what it comes down to. That would be one reform I would go back to, and also because most of the alternate uniforms, the city and statement uniforms, are not white, right? Like the overwhelming majority of them are color. So by forcing a team to wear white, at least one team on the court, you're essentially forcing one team to, more often than not, wear one of its primary uniforms. And that, to me, helps root the game back in the original uniforms, the original branding program you were talking about, so that you have an idea of who's playing, that you don't have like two crazy, like gonzo costumes on the court at the same time.
Okay, so this goes back to our original theme of this segment, and is how do we fix that?
I would say that I think reintroducing white helps to fix that.
But white is already there. Oh, you say reintroduce white, that one team has to wear white.
If one team has to wear white, then I think that because most of the alternate uniforms are colored, then if you're forcing one team to wear white, you are de facto often forcing them to wear their primary colored uniform versus an alternate, and that's a familiar uniform, and so that helps sort of bring some grounding and stability to at least one of the teams on the court. Another thing is that we're talking about these statement and city uniforms and all. It's mandated that all the teams have to have them. And of course, some teams also have a throwback, and some teams have these earned uniforms, which is basically like a participation trophy uniform, which I think is ridiculous. so you have the the teams are all required to have these. They're all mandated.
Hmm.
And so you have teams like the Celtics or the Knicks, which traditionally had been much more like classic legacy brand kind of teams, and they didn't get too wacky or crazy with alternate uniforms. But now they are required to have at least two alternate uniforms, and usually three. And so I think the fact that they come up with these programs like Statement or City or whatever and make it one size fits all, like
Hmm.
everybody has to do it, like you can't opt out of it. That's another reform I would put in. And I know if a team didn't do it, fans would probably say, like, "Where's our city? Why did those teams have it?" But we see this in other sports where some teams have more alternate uniforms than other teams, and some of these. Our friend Todd Radom, your co-author, who you mentioned earlier, when the Trailblazers came out with their city uniform for this season, I remember he said, "Not even a breadcrumb of a clue what team this is for," because it just, it's brown.
Yeah,
It doesn't say Portland. It says Oregon. It has no hint that this has anything to do with the Portland Trailblazers. Like if
exactly.
you could like know inside out what that team's visual program is
Hmm.
about, and there's nothing that would clue you in that this uniform had anything to do with that franchise. And so many of the city uniforms are like that. Not all of them, and I like some of them, but some of
But
them are just like they have no connection to the franchise.
now going back to 2019 when the Raptors did win the championship, one thing I noticed was on the front page of the newspaper, here's the Toronto Raptors. We finally did it. This is the only time we'll ever win, so let's enjoy it. And the uniform had a Nike logo on it. It had a Sun Life Financial logo on it. It had a big chevron that said North on it. It didn't say Toronto. It didn't say Raptors. And there was no anywhere on the uniform. I think there's a tiny Raptors logo at the bottom of the shorts. And that was the only indication that this was the Toronto Raptors.
And as a Raptors fan, did that bug you a little? Did that sort of lessen the moment of pride for you?
It didn't lessen the moment of pride because we won the championship. That's all I cared about.
Mm-hmm.
But it did bother me that we won the championship in what was, they were wearing their earned edition uniforms when they won the championship,
Really?
which is like an alternate of an alternate, right? Like, and they've now embraced that probably because they won the championship in it.
Mhm.
But still, at the time, it seemed silly. And the championship ring it again said North on it instead of Raptors Toronto. There was no right. It didn't feel like we won. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
still won. But um, I do have some ideas on how to fix the NBA's. Would you like to hear them?
I would. I have some ideas as well. But
Who goes first? I'll go first.
well, I would say one of the things that makes these alternate programs so problematic is the rate at which they turn over.
Yes.
Right? Like the city edition, it's there for one season and then it's gone. Like the nature of the program, the way they've defined it, is that you get a new design every year, which is really, it runs counter to the way we usually think about uniform design, because
Hmm.
except for something like the Olympics, which is a defined 2-week span of time, and where a uniform is designed to make a big visual splash, aside from something like that, we usually think of uniform design as something that's built to last,
Yeah.
that it's supposed to stand the test of time. It's not necessarily of the moment, or
Hmm.
a particular fashion trend or something like that. It's built to last. But the city uniforms, by definition, are not built to last. They're supposed to turn over every
Yep.
single year, which means even if you have a good one, you don't get to keep it. Like, it's gone.
Yeah.
And by the time you get used to it, good or bad, well, it's gone, and now there's a new one you have to get used
That's
to, which
right.
causes that whole problem of turning on the TV and not knowing who's playing. Because especially for the more casual fan who aren't into this stuff as much as you and I are,
Hmm.
they don't get enough exposure to these designs especially when you have 5 or 6 uniforms. You can only wear them a certain number of games per year because there's
Especially in a
so many.
shortened season.
Yeah, right. In this year when
Yeah.
it's a shortened season. And so all of these things, it sort of adds up to not enough exposure to breed familiarity.
Hmm.
And so one thing I would do is that if I wouldn't require the city editions to turn over as much. And it was interesting when the Utah Jazz, their
Yep.
first city design, which was the Red Rock design, which looked nothing like any other uniforms. Of course, it certainly didn't look like a Utah Jazz
Tequila
uniform.
Sunrise, kind of.
It was more like a tequila sunrise, but it was very popular. And for whatever reason, they got permission or just decided, or I don't know the sort of backroom machinations on that, but they were able to keep that design, not just for a second year, but I believe for a third.
Yeah, and I'd like to figure out how that happens, right? Like, is this an option for every team? Can they go to the NBA and say, "Hey, we love this design. Can we keep going with it?" Or is it just like a one-time only thing for them?
Yeah, I don't know, but that's a situation where they had an alternate that was due to it had an expiration date. Basically, it
Yep.
was going to self-destruct after 1 year, and then they said, you know what, we're going to keep it because the fans like it. And like that's a situation that you should be able to do. Like if you sort of strike lightning or hit on something that the fans like and that you like,
Mhm.
you should be able to stick with it. And it seems ridiculous that these programs are designed to turn over every year. And so that's the city ones are every year. I think the statement is every 2 years. And
Every 3 years, every two,
is
three
it every?
years.
It's just too much turnover. Aside from not being able to have any familiarity.
Instead, what you see teams doing now is, if they hit a popular city edition design, is they will carry that theme over into another year, like Miami is doing, like
Yeah, they'll
Chicago
riff
did for
on
a
it
few
in some
years.
other way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So over the course of 3 or 4 years, they exhaust every possible color combination, basically creating an alternate identity for themselves. Like this is minor league baseball. Um, and over the course of, half a decade, hey, here's what our home, road, and alternate uniforms would look like if this is what our team looked like normally.
Right, right.
But it's
And sort
not.
of like what
So
you said about the earned edition, they create
yeah.
alternates to the alternate.
That's right, and that's what they're doing for City every year. Is just, and that it just makes it a little more confusing. And Utah's doing that this year, right? They have they called it their dark mode of their Red
Right,
Rock.
where they've
Yeah,
done the riff on the Red Rock.
yeah. So it's black now
I
instead of.
actually like it. I think it looks
Yeah, it
good. It
looks
doesn't
good.
necessarily look like the Utah Jazz,
Nope.
but I could see them. I mean, this is what your team has done, right, in
Yes.
Toronto, right? Because the whole chevron thing that was originally an alternate.
Yep. It was a. Was it a city or was it? I don't know. It started off as gold and black. I know that.
Right. It was the Drake uniform or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And now that has become essentially the template for the primary identity.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I could
Across the
see
board.
that happening with a team like the Jazz,
Hmm.
where they basically abandon the purple, abandon the mountain thing, and do this sort of tequila sunrise style design. But that doesn't work. A lot of these things are not good enough
No.
or worthy of transitioning to full time. And
What do you think about Miami going full time with the?
with the Miami Vice,
Yeah.
I think that would be kind of cool,
Yeah.
actually, for them. The Heat, even in the Adidas days, the Heat had more alternate uniforms than any
Mhm.
other NBA team. They were the most freewheeling team. They played around with the most color combos, even though it was basically the same word mark on the chest all the time, or the same word mark font, or sometimes it
Yeah.
said Miami, sometimes it said Heat. But they always.
El
So
Heat.
I feel like that was in like tinkering was in their DNA already,
Mhm.
like to sort of mess around with things, and so that works for them. Like that, the idea of riffing all the different color combos of the Miami Vice, even this year's, with this ridiculous gradation. And it is ridiculous, but in a way, it's sort of like taking it to its logical extreme. And I feel like that is part of what that team is about. Like
Mhm.
it is their DNA. And so I'm kind of cool with that.
Yeah. Well, and if they made it their full-time brand, though, like I think if
Oh,
anyone could pull it off,
to
yeah,
make it not the alternate, but to transition to it.
right.
Yeah, I
Going
could
with
see
that color
that.
scheme,
I could see
it
that.
would work for Miami of all places in the world, and it would be a color scheme that they could own, right?
They would
Instead of
definitely own it for sure. Let's
instead
hope
of
they
red
would.
and black.
Let's hope no other team would go for it.
Yeah. Well, you have how many teams wearing red and black versus
Right.
teams wearing, light blue and fusia and pink,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah,
no one else is going to do it. And, Miami's the city to do it, right?
absolutely.
That captures their nightlife perfectly.
Hmm. What are your changes to your solutions to fix the NBA mess?
Okay. I have a list. All right. I was going to have props. I was going to show them on the video feed, but, time is my enemy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've rambled on too. Have I cut into
No,
your
no, no,
like?
no. I didn't have the
Oh,
chance to make the props, is what I'm
oh,
saying.
okay.
Okay, so my changes are a little more, I guess, drastic than yours.
Okay.
Okay, so get rid of the icon association statement city designations. All right,
Okay. Well, I like that. I would
you like
see.
that?
I was trying to work within the framework and not be accused of being like
Oh,
cranky
okay.
old man. but I'll let you be the cranky old man.
This isn't going to be cranky old man there though, because there's going to be enough changes. It's not just black and white. You know,
Okay.
there's
Okay.
Every team gets one primary uniform that has to be a colored design.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
you wear that most of the time. Every team also has a clash kit, soccer style, that's white.
Ah.
Yeah? So you put on the Chicago Bulls game, they're going to wear red unless they're on the road and their opponent also wears a red or orange
Mm-hmm.
color scheme. Then they have to wear white. An alternate uniform is permitted, but it must follow the team's color scheme and their usual word mark uniform design pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very boring, right? So maybe I am cranky old man. A fourth uniform is only allowed as a throwback for an acceptable anniversary season.
Mm. That's always interested me about the NBA. The other leagues don't do. In the other leagues, you can have a throwback anytime you want. It doesn't have to be like
Yes.
some multiple of 5-year anniversary for whatever year you're throwing back to. And
Mm.
I've never really understood, like, why can't you just have a throwback anytime? Because it's fun.
Because that'd be too much fun. We can't have too much fun, Paul. There'd be chaos, bedlam.
That I think those all sound like sensible reforms that have approximately zero chance of happening. But
I know.
but I like the idea of a clash kit, which is a soccer term,
Mm-hmm.
and the NBA. That's the kind of term you wouldn't see in any of the other leagues. But the NBA is so much more internationally minded.
Yep.
And I could see them doing something like that and calling it that because they are really trying to expand the team. It's interesting that comes up, this notion of the international. I just wrapped up a freelance article that's going to run on Inside Hook, the men's lifestyle website I sometimes write for. And they wanted me to write about Daniel Arsham, who's the modern artist, the contemporary artist who was recently hired by the Cavaliers to be their creative director. And so he has some strong ideas about what he wants to do with the Cavs. And one of the interesting things he said to me was, a lot of the growth and a lot of the people I'm designing for, as we're trying to expand the brand here, is like a guy in Tokyo wearing a Lakers jersey. He might not even know who's on the Lakers.
Yeah.
He might not be able to name a player, or he probably doesn't even watch the games except maybe during the playoffs or the finals or something like that. And that he just thinks it's cool to wear an American sports brand,
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think we all know that is where the NBA is kind of aiming a lot of its marketing and brand expansion efforts. But it was interesting to hear somebody actually phrase it that way, that I am creating things for somebody who isn't even actually a fan of the sport, who doesn't watch the sport and who can't name any of the players.
Yeah, it's good to hear them actually just admit it, come right out and say it.
Yeah. So that's a fan who might turn on the TV and not care whether he can identify who's playing. And that's it's interesting to think that is potentially where the growth is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if they maxed out on quote unquote normal fans who want to identify who's playing and who can name the stats and know who the players are and all that. It's interesting. It's really designing and creating for a different kind of fan. And we are a certain kind of fan, but there's another market out there. And it was a really interesting story to report and to talk to this guy. And he knows his sports. He knows his basketball. It's not like he has contempt for regular sports fans. He's just saying there's other kinds of sports fans out there, especially overseas. And that's who I'm thinking of a lot when I'm creating these things.
And I'm sure you see something similar on your site, but I don't see as much of a surge in traffic from international users as I do when I post an NBA story. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Especially from like the Philippines and Japan and China, the traffic just spikes if it's NBA. Anything else?
Well, the guy who leaked most of the City Edition uniforms back this past November is in Brazil.
Yeah.
And he's this Brazilian guy who's really into the NBA. And his dream job is like to work for Nike or to have in some sort of sports marketing capacity. Mm-hmm. But he's just a guy, and he had on his own has developed contacts at the various factories that produce the uniforms, and I mean, he was really doing like investigative journalism better than we
Yeah.
were, and he got all this, all these leaks, and they all turned out to be legit. Like
Mhm.
I got to interview him, and I said, I don't have to use your name if you don't. I can keep you anonymous. He said, no, you can use my name. I want people to know. and he speaks decent English, and we did the interview via Twitter DM, actually, like,
Yeah.
direct message. But it was fascinating, and he was so into the NBA, like as much as any American I've ever known. It was fascinating.
I remember sending him a congratulatory message like, "Hey, way to go, man! You nailed this." But one way to not get a job with Nike or the NBA is to leak every single Nike and NBA.
Yeah, that is
Uh,
probably true. That is
yeah,
probably
there's
true.
there's a reason why I don't leak as much as I used to, and I'm sorry to say, but you need those contacts.
So the NBA, I don't know if it's fixable, but certainly those are some interesting ideas. We've identified some of the problems. I don't know if we've solved any of
Oh
them.
no, I fixed it, Paul. It's
You
done.
fit okay? All right,
It's done.
done and done, done and done.
Free, free consulting advice there for you,
Okay.
Adam Silver.
Before we move on, I want to say that this episode of Unified is brought to you in part by Home Field Apparel. Are you bored with all the cookie cutter t-shirts for your favorite college sports teams? Home Field Apparel, a premier brand out of Indianapolis, offers incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college sports designs, so you won't look like everyone else wearing the same Nike t-shirt. Home Field combs through historic collections to find unique logos, mascots, and other graphics, and then uses those graphics to make thoughtful designs for schools as large as the University of Alabama or as small as a Division III school like Hope College. Again, on a personal note, Home Field has advertised on my website, UniWatch, and I can honestly say that they're a great company to work with. They're adding schools to their inventory all the time. So if you don't see what you want, you can even contact them to let you know what they're looking for. I'm sorry, to let them know what you're looking for. Check them out at homefieldapparel.com. Get 15% off your first order with a checkout code UNIFIED. That's homefieldapparel.com, and use the checkout code UNIFIED for 15% off.
I hate those cookie cutter designs so much. Right? It's the exact same design for every team. I'm glad they're doing that. And
Yeah, they have cool stuff. And seriously,
it,
Home Field Apparel, it's like I'm not as into the college thing in terms of college gear, but for people who are, they're a really great site.
and we were talking yesterday about it. You were asking me take a look around, and I love seeing that Syracuse orange mascot. I'm a sucker for that guy. He's the big smiley face on the orange. Like, oh God, I love that, and they have that on a bunch of Syracuse t-shirts there, which I loved seeing.
So now it is time for our question of the week. And Chris, what do we have?
Well, we have a question from Mr. Stephen Peters, who wants to know our opinions of teams within a city adopting a singular element to feature in their logo, such as, say, a star for Dallas Cowboys, Stars, Rangers, Mavericks, or where a similar color scheme is used across the entire city. And of course, Pittsburgh is the best example of that, where all their teams use black and gold. What do you think about that, Paul?
First, I'm going to confess that it had actually never occurred to me that the four Dallas teams
Yeah.
all wear a star. And somehow that had just eluded me. And I don't think of it I mean, the Cowboys, obviously the
Right.
stars, like, so, but I don't think of like the Rangers, or it just it hadn't been part of my consciousness, but that's interesting.
But that goes beyond Dallas, right? That almost stretches across Texas, right? The
Yeah, the
Astros, the
Astros have a
Texans.
star. Yeah, that
Yeah,
may be part of why.
right.
As far as colors, that comes up a lot. So many people say, like, shouldn't all the Philadelphia teams wear the colors of the Philadelphia flag, or whatever the case might be? And I've always thought that it's neat that Pittsburgh has that the four Pittsburgh sports teams share the same color scheme, but I wouldn't really want to impose that as a rule on other cities. I think one of the reasons it's kind of cool in Pittsburgh is that it's unique,
Hmm.
and that it works for them. And there's sort of a wow factor whenever somebody realizes it for the first time and gets a kick out of it. And if it becomes sort of a copycat thing where every city does that, or the teams for all the different cities, I personally, I wouldn't want that. And also, like, do you want the Boston Celtics changing their colors to something, to whatever the colors of the Boston flag are? I don't even know what they are, but I'm pretty sure they're not green and white. And I don't think you can just shoehorn teams into that kind of format. Also, speaking personally as somebody who lives in New York City, we have so many teams here. We have at least 2 teams for all the major pro leagues. The idea that all the city's teams would wear the same colors just seems a little nuts. We do have the Knicks and the Mets both wearing blue and orange, and those are in fact the New York City flag colors. So that's kind of nice, but I wouldn't want to impose that on all the city's teams.
Before the Islanders fans come into our comments, Paul also meant the Islanders.
Well, the Islanders actually wear blue and orange more because it's the Nassau. Those are also the Nassau County flag colors.
Never mind. See. And I'm a flag guy. I should know more about the flag stuff. I knew New York City's flag was blue and orange. I didn't know that about Nassau. Now, I grew up in I grew up in a city where we had a unified color scheme. Unified, good name for a show. The Blue Jays, Maple Leafs, Argonauts, they all wore blue and white. And I loved that growing up. And that's the colors of the Toronto flag as well. But, it goes back before that was the colors of the Toronto flag.
Were you aware of that growing up? Like, did your father point that out or something and say all the local teams wear the same colors and all that?
Well, there was a joke. There's an uncle of mine who his thing was to annoy me as much as possible. Everyone has and he would say something like, "What's blue and white, blue and white, blue and white, and lives in the cellar?" And it's all Toronto sports teams. Very funny. Hey, the Jays are in first place, buddy. That's what I'd say. And I love that. Come playoff time, everyone's wearing blue and white. It's very sort of, the whole city can rally around it. Mm-hmm. And I love that all my stuff was blue and white. Blue's my favorite color, so it worked out nicely.
You're wearing the red shirt as we speak.
Well, because it's Raptors. It's NBA Day.
Okay. Yeah.
It's red, but with a purple logo. So whatever. So the Raptors come onto the scene and they go against the grain, right? They're not going to wear blue and white. They're instead going to wear purple and red, and which I hated at first. But as they got a little bit better, it was really neat to suddenly, when the Raptors go on a run and after the Leafs are knocked out, everyone's wearing red instead of blue, right? In this town where everyone's wearing blue for sports, and now red just sort of pops, and it was very refreshing. It was like a shot of adrenaline to see, like, those people watching color TV for the first time. Whoa, there are other colors beyond blue and white. I liked that. I liked that there was sort of a team doing its own thing, and a city like Philadelphia where all the teams wear different colors. Right. A city where they could easily go red, white, and blue for every team.
Right.
You have the Flyers wearing orange, the Eagles wearing midnight green, and the Phillies wearing red. And of course, the Sixers wearing red, white, and blue. That's cool. And each team has their own reasons for wearing those colors, right? It's not like it's the city's flag. It's, the Flyers wore black and orange because that was the alma mater of one of the original team owners. Their college wore, I can't remember right now. It might have been Texas or something. So I like that there's individual stories there beyond just, we did it because everyone else is doing it. That's kind of boring, Let these teams be their own teams and do their own thing, and their fans can, maybe a Raptors fan isn't a Maple Leafs fan and doesn't want to wear blue and white, right? Like, let them be their own little tribes, I guess, within a city.
Chris, I think we have lurched into agreement on this one.
Hooray! We do that a lot, though. Let's not pretend that we.
Yeah. I think that wraps us up for this episode. Do you want to take us out?
Have we already hit an hour? Look at us.
I think we've reached both the end of our content to talk about and the end of our hour. Yeah. So
time flies, I guess they say. So I'm doing credits this week.
You are.
Right. Like the Super Bowl, we alternate who hosts the credits.
Yeah.
Okay, so Unified is a joint production of UniWatch and SportsLogos.Net. Our producer-editor, who we thank so much, is Chris Fraderigo. And show notes for this episode are available at our website, which is unified.show. You can follow us on Twitter at UnifiedCast, where you can also learn about, new t-shirts and stickers we have for sale. and I saw them and they look awesome. I want one, and hopefully,
I want one too. We have them for
yeah.
sale, but we haven't actually gotten any for ourselves yet.
And we won't get one for free. We have to buy one.
We've sold. I can report we've sold as of this recording, I think 8 T-shirts. So not
8
bad.
T-shirts. So it's a limited edition so far.
Yeah, right now at least. Yeah.
The unified logo is by that super talented designer Brian Gundell. Thank you, Brian. Our organ music you heard at the beginning of the show is by the Seattle band Boat. If you're listening to us on audio, you can also see video versions where you can see our smiling, shaggy faces at youtube.com/sportslogos. That fancy animated intro at the start of the video is by Michael Princip. If you would like to submit a question to our Question of the Week segment, or to inquire about advertising, or just say hi, that's fine. Email us at info@unified.show. It goes to Paul and myself. We'll both see it. If you like Unified, please, please, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you don't like Unified, don't leave a review. I'd appreciate it. And that's it for this episode. Everybody, stay well, stay healthy. We will see you all next week. Thank you so much, Paul. Have a good day.
Catch you next time.